Hello and welcome to the latest edition of ICLG Meets. And this time I am thrilled, really thrilled, to be joined by Katie Wheatley. Now, Katie is Head of Financial Crime and High Net Worth Defence at Bindmans. She acts in some of the most complex and high-profile white-collar crime cases. The full house, really, involving fraud, bribery, corruption, insider dealing and money laundering. So we're going to have a lot to say. So let's start saying it now. Hello, Katie.
Hello, and thank you for having me on.
You're very, very welcome. It's lovely to meet you. Before we dig a little bit deeper, I'm always fascinated to know with lawyers who've reached the pinnacle of their profession is what drove you into this area of the law, and when did you realise you wanted to be in this particular area of the law?
Yeah. So originally, as you know, lawyers have to go through a sort of training period, which these days is called a training contract. Back in my days, you were an articled clerk, but it's the same thing. And I, following the sort of lead from my university, was told, go to the city. That's where the place where lawyers thrive. And there was no real attention to criminal law, in spite of the fact that my university was very well known for that area, and that was one of the areas I was very interested in. So I sort of went to the city and then realised that actually I was more interested in helping individual people. And I was very lucky to get a training contract with a private client firm who didn't do any crime but did things like employment and some commercial work, conveyancing and things like that. But simultaneously, as a young person, I was meeting lots of lawyers and hearing about, and particularly some lawyers who were already practicing in criminal law, and also reading on the news some quite high-profile appeals to do with the IRA and leading lawyers in that area. And I just decided that I wanted to do something that would really what I felt then would really make a difference to people's lives. And so that's how I moved into criminal law. I got a job in southeast London, working all hours God sends, going to courts and police stations, and that was my entry into criminal law.
What's the practical difference? Because white collar crime is sort of separated from all other crime. If you're defending and if you're preparing a brief, what is the practical difference between preparing a defence for somebody who's held up a post office with a shotgun or someone who's embezzled £6 million from the bank they work for?
Yeah, the principles are exactly the same, which is why so many people like me end up in the white-collar space, because you always go back to basics. You look at what crime are they accused of doing, what are the constituent elements of those crimes, what evidence has the investigator or prosecutor got, what has your client got to say about it? Have they got a defence? If so, how are you going to be able to assert it? And that applies across the whole criminal law discipline, white collar, general crime. It's the founding principle of any criminal defence, because we all know that we can rely on the presumption of innocence, that there's quite a high test for prosecutors to meet in order to prosecute a case. They have to be sure or be satisfied there's a realistic prospect of conviction. So a lot of work goes into looking at, well, can this be proved before you even start making your moves? Yeah. And then it's about the building blocks after that.
Yeah. What I found really interesting about white-collar crime is how, well, I'm going to ask you whether I'm right, how much it must have evolved. So going back to my person holding up a post office with a shotgun, that was the same 100 years ago as it would have been yesterday. Yeah. But from the outside looking in, it seems that white-collar crime, maybe it's tech, I don't know, has changed beyond measure, even in the relatively short time that you've been practising.
Yes.
What do you think the main changes are that have changed the face of this particular sector?
Yeah, so I think there are two things. First of all, of course, is technology. But secondly, that now more of a focus on corruption, bribery, money laundering. Originally, the drive and insider dealing, actually, all of those were driven by what was happening in America in those times. And, slowly the UK, European countries and other countries around the world started to adopt similar approaches. A lot of people operating here, if they had a footprint in America, were caught anyway, in some cases, by quite draconian American laws. So it became something that the government became focused on here. They started introducing things like Bribery Act with a failing to prevent offence, and deferred prosecution agreements and all of those things. And so there is more of a government focus now on white collar. Of course, police still run around trying to arrest people who occasionally do robberies, but I mean, of course, those don't happen so much anymore because it's much easier to do something online. So it's really the sort of scrutiny now that people working in the white collar sector find themselves in. Also, there's a lot more regulatory scrutiny from people like the FCA. They have dual powers, so the FCA might have a look at some trading, for example, and think, well, is this criminal insider dealing, or is it something slightly less than that? Could we use our civil powers to punish this person if they've done something wrong? So that exposes all of the white collar community to much more scrutiny and potential risk to criminal proceedings.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned civil powers, because here's something that has always confused me. There is civil fraud and there is criminal fraud.
Yes.
At what point does one become the other?
Well, now that the legal test for dishonesty has been aligned between the two practices, the definitions in some ways are very similar. But I think that when there is a particular mental element that has to be proved for most financial crimes. In terms of, like the Fraud Act, for example, dishonest state of mind, or in conspiracy to defraud, it's to deprive somebody of a right. But there's fundamentally dishonesty, sometimes an intention. Money laundering, they might need to prove knowledge, and those have to be proved beyond reasonable doubt. And then the end result is if they are proved, is a conviction which can lead to, obviously, if it's serious enough for someone to might have to go to prison, and also to some quite ruinous confiscation proceedings. So that's one route. In the civil proceedings, the burden of proof is, generally speaking, lower. I'm not a civil specialist, so I'll leave you to interview someone else about that.
Yeah.
But and the sort of the nature of the cases can be slightly more commercially focused than the criminal ones.
I see. You mentioned earlier tech being one of the main things that has changed the face of your work. Now, obviously, tech enables crooks. They can hide what they're doing behind VPNs and the blockchain and crypto and all that. But of course, the good guys also have access to the tech.
Yes.
So does it even out, or are the good guys now at an advantage because of their access to tech, or at a disadvantage because of the fraudsters' access to tech?
Well, I think everyone is moving, and of course it's not just fraudsters that are manipulating or misusing technology. I mean, obviously, hostile state actors is a very significant concern.
Sure.
But I think that is why the law enforcement authorities, SFO, FCA, police, investing so heavily now, perhaps slightly behind the curve in technology, but that is all, the focus now. The investment is all in technology, and trying to find ways of catching people online. So instead of running around in your cop car, they're all sort of floating around the internet, trying to identify the wrongdoers.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting, but it's going to make cop shows on telly less exciting.
Probably.
Just people sitting at computer screens, isn't it?
Yes,
but there we
is.
are. The drama writers are going to have to up their game.
Yeah.
Now, you're talking about regulators. I think you obviously mentioned the FCA, the SFO, being more active. Do you... And I know a lot of lawyers in your position, but in civil enforcement, work very closely with regulators. Do you find yourself doing that on the criminal side as well?
You can do. I mean, quite often you're going to have something twin going on anyway, and then you've got to make, it's not, if it was just a simple criminal matter, very easily you can make the decision, well, actually, we're not quite sure they can prove it. Let's just keep stum. Let's hold our account until we know we need to deploy it. But if you've got a regulator also asking questions at the same time, the account is probably going to have to come out. If they're parallel investigations, it may come out rather sooner than you'd like, and obviously could be disclosable into the criminal proceedings. So you have to think quite carefully about how you prepare for those types of regulatory interview, and know that what you say may not stay within the confines of that space. So I mean, it's like any, there are some people that are easy to work with. Sometimes it is. I always like to build up a good, respectful working relationship with them. I mean, obviously we can get, we have to defend our clients' rights. We don't always see things the same way, but I think along the sides there is quite a lot for us to be gained by being able to pick up the phone and speak to people and ask them about things. Perhaps they're more willing to discuss things a bit more freely when they're on the phone rather than the emails where they feel they've got to be so precise about everything.
Sure.
And so sometimes, when you're exploring something that might be quite grey, it's quite good if you know that person is going to accept your call and feel that they can speak to you and know that you are respectful of them and that you're not going to sort of misuse in some way what they tell you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you can do it once, but they won't cooperate so much the second time, will they?
Yeah.
I'm guessing one of the other things that must have changed over the course that you've been doing this work is cross-border issues, more and more white-collar crime. In fact, from what I've read, most of it has some sort of cross-border element. Do you find that a help, a hindrance, or just something you've got to take on the chin?
Well, I think you've got to take it on the chin for sure. I mean, for the investigators, it's clearly a hindrance because they may, if they're aware of relevant evidence that might be outside of this jurisdiction, they're reliant on mutual legal assistance requests to the relevant jurisdiction to obtain that material. But in the bigger cases, you also hear and see, coordinated cross-border collaboration between, say, America, UK, or maybe even more European jurisdictions and so on. So they I think all of the investigators know they've got those MLA options available to them. They'll deploy them, and they may, to some extent, do a little bit of forum shopping to decide where it's easiest to get the evidence. And then use mutual legal assistance to share that around.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, earlier on in our conversation, you mentioned DPAs, deferred prosecution agreements. What is so special about financial crime that they get deferred prosecution agreements, but if you rob a car, you don't get one?
They're only available to companies. At the moment.
Okay.
So an individual who may have committed an act that means that the corporate is having to take responsibility for their crimes, that person will go through the criminal justice system. They'll be charged if there's sufficient evidence for a realistic prospect of conviction, and it's in the public interest for them to be tried. But the corporate does have the luxury of, well, they wouldn't call it a luxury at all, but an option of going to, say, the SFO and disclosing that they may have discovered that something's gone wrong. They investigate it, they realise a crime's been committed, and if they fully cooperate, then there is a possibility that they will get a deferred prosecution agreement, which means that they won't bear a conviction, and that can be enormously helpful for a corporate because it helps with certainty and trying to put a wrap on things, and it may mean that they can carry on doing things like government contracts and so on, which might not be possible if they get a conviction.
Now, we started off talking about how things have changed over the past 25 years, and I think sometimes you think we are where we are and that's it, but I think you've been doing this long enough to know that we're not at the end of this sort of tech revolution. In fact, terrifyingly, someone said to me the other day, if AI were the automotive industry, we're at the Model T Ford, which is both wondrous and terrifying, isn't it? Both at the same time. So how do you think your job's going to change over the next 10 years?
Well, it's already changing, and we're already having to think about advising clients about how they engage with AI. And the risks of doing that when they're preparing their legal cases. Obviously, the legal press is awash with people who've unfortunately not checked their research, research and things like that. Some of it is about sort of thinking about our, so obviously controls and training our people properly to use AI for what it's best at. No doubt there are many things that I don't know about yet, which for which it could be useful. AI will obviously change. Could well, change how we might do some things like basic document preparation or interrogate large volumes of material, but nothing will ever replace the human when it comes to tactical decision making. Well, I say that, perhaps it will, but lawyers aren't just about what do you know about the law, but how do you apply it, and those tactics, which also rely quite a lot on soft skills and sussing things out, reading between the lines. I'm not sure how long it would take for AI to replace that.
Yeah.
So
hopefully a long time.
Yes, I hope so.
until we're retired. Anyway. But sticking with AI, that at the moment, as I understand it, from the point of view of your clients, of your defence clients, there is no defence at the moment, is there? They said it wasn't me, the robot did it.
Well, the robot has to be told, don't they?
That's true, but the more they evolve, they are making their own decisions, and admittedly based on the data that is put in. Do you think we will ever come to a point where, we call it artificial intelligence, but it's soft intelligence in a sense that it's based only on what already exists out there. But we are on the brink of what I think they're calling hard AI, where it will actually, I don't like doing air quotes, but I'm going to do them now, think for itself. Under those circumstances, do you think should there be a criminal defence to say, I trusted the robot, it was sold to me by, I better not mention a name, X Corp. They guaranteed it would be accurate and would manage my accounts properly and my trading platforms accurately. And it's got it wrong. I'm up for fraud and it wasn't my fault, it was the robot.
Well, I think the law probably has to evolve at the same time, doesn't it? Because, when you can think about things like incorporating recklessness tests, negligence tests into laws that no doubt will develop alongside AI. But once you've been sold an item, I don't think forever onwards we would get to a situation where you'd be able to just sort of excuse any act committed by your robot because that was what was sold to you. I mean, I'm sure that the law will evolve alongside to make sure that is not a get out of jail free card. We will see. Yeah.
We will see.
Yeah.
Finally, what motivates you when you get up in the morning and you've got a day's work ahead of you?
Clients, really. We're trusted as lawyers to do our very best for them, and I know that they're relying on me, and I want to get out of bed and go and help them as much as I can. Sometimes as well, you get some quite interesting legal problems, and I do like a good little knotty legal problems. So that I find interesting, and also the kind of tactical decision making I find great as well. And you can think away as you're going on your journey to work about, there's this, there's that. And so I find those are very satisfying parts of the job.
Well, it's clear to me. It's clear to me they're in very safe hands. So, Katie
thank you.
Wheatley, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.